Hello and welcome to another Magic 2015 gameplay. Today we're taking a look at Azorius Control, a blue-white control deck in its purest form. We are not messing around with Archaeomancers and Cloud Shifts. Instead we're playing a lot of removal, a lot of draw spells and counter spells, and only two real win conditions in the deck. One of them is Kozilek, the 10 mana Eldrazi. You get to draw 4 cards when you cast him. Annihilator 4 means when he attacks, the opponent has to sacrifice 4 permanents, and if Kozilek ever enters the graveyard from anywhere, you get to shuffle him back into your library together with your entire graveyard. So it's very difficult for the opponent to permanently get rid of Kozilek, because sooner or later he will draw him again. So your opponent pretty much has to exile him in order to get rid of him permanently, and if the opponent somehow does exile Kozilek, we still have Plan B, which is our second win condition, which is Elixir of Immortality, which sounds a little strange to call this a win condition, but basically we get to shuffle our graveyard back into our library, much like Kozilek, which will result in the opponent running out of cards in his main deck before you do, because you get to keep shuffling your graveyard back into your library, so you will not end up decking yourself and the opponent will, so you can win the game that way. So the 5 life is not the main reason why we're playing Elixir, instead as a win condition to make the opponent deck himself before you do. So let's take a look at the other cards in the deck here. We've got Wall of Omens for some early defense, replaces itself, prevents a lot of damage from creatures, so just an excellent card in a control deck. We've got Reprisal as a one-off, a removal spell at 2 mana and instant speed, is very good at killing big creatures. It is a little narrow because it doesn't get every creature. There are some smaller creatures that are still problematic that this doesn't kill, so only running one of them. We've got also one Raise the Alarm as an extra card to help against swarm strategies or other small aggro decks. Just making 2 soldiers at instant speed that you can block with can be very useful. Then we've got a Divine Verdict as an additional removal spell. It is a little expensive at 4 mana, but we can in a control deck keep up our mana, and if the opponent doesn't play anything that we wanna Divine Verdict, we can always use our mana to draw spells instead, so it's not the end of the world, but it is nice to have a removal spell that can kill creatures like Brimaz that Reprisal doesn't hit, so I like the 1 Divine Verdict. Then we have Baneslayer Angel, which in this deck usually is not going to be a turn 5 play, just because we want to cast the Baneslayer Angel and also be able to protect it with a counter spell to counter a removal spell. So usually this is going to be cast around turn 8, once we do have enough mana to do both, but certainly can come down earlier against an aggressive deck just to gain some life, and she can definitely win a game all by herself if she goes uncontested. Then we have Angelic Edict as a 5 mana sorcery, so it is pretty slow and clunky, but it can exile a creature or enchantment, and there's quite a few problematic enchantments running around, and the exile clause can also be very relevant, again against cards like Kozilek perhaps. It's also good against cards like Pelakka Worm that would otherwise draw a card for the opponent if he dies, but by exiling him that does not happen. So that's Angelic Edict. Then the sweeper in the deck, we only get 2 of them, but they are very powerful, and that's Planar Cleansing. At 6 mana we get to destroy all non-land permanents, so we are unlikely to have any non-land permanents laying around, and the opponent likely has to pick up a lot of permanents and put them in a graveyard, which is exactly what we want to do. So buys us a lot of time and usually kills a lot of creatures. So that's Planar Cleansing, also deals with enchantments or artifacts the opponent might have. Then we also have a Resolute Archangel, just 7 mana to put a 4/4 flyer into play, but more importantly this also puts our life total back to our starting life total, which is usually 20. Then we've got some Quickens in here, that can make the next sorcery at instant speed and also replaces itself, so it's not like we're down on cards when we cast Quicken. So the sorcery into instant is very relevant with cards like Planar Cleansing, as you can use this on the opponent's attack step instead of having to tap out in your own turn, and also works with Angelic Edict much in the same way. Then we've got Courier's Capsule as a 2 mana artifact, and then for 2 mana and tapping the capsule, which we can do right away because artifacts don't have summoning sickness, we get to draw 2 cards, so a total of 4 mana in 2 small rations. So just a card advantage card, and we do need a critical mass of those to stay ahead on cards. So that's Courier's Capsule. And then we've got 2 Voyage's Ends as a way to deal with creatures that might or might not be enchanted by auras, for example, and that can get pretty big pretty quickly, so a bounce spell is very good against those, and can also just be used to gain some tempo and some time against bigger creatures, just by returning them and forcing the opponent to cast them again, and maybe by that time you can have a counter spell up. And I'm playing a Voyage's End over Vapor Snag because in this deck dealing 1 damage from Vapor Snag is less important than the Scry 1, where you can perhaps look for more lands or put some lands on the bottom if you don't need them, and the 1 extra mana is also not really a problem. Then we've got Think Twice as an additional draw spell, so a lot like Courier's Capsule, and this one you can play at instant speed for 2 mana and then flash it back for 3 mana, and eventually you will have drawn 2 cards at the cost of 5 mana, so a little more expensive than the capsule, but you can use this at instant speed, which is the big upside. So playing 4 of these. Then we've got 1 Negate to counter non-creature spells, just to sort of get the opponent if they don't expect us to have this counter up for 2 mana. We've got a couple of Nullifies to counter creature spells, and especially good against creature with Enter the Battlefield abilities, so the opponent doesn't get any value from them. Then we've got Dissolve as our counter spell that can counter anything for 3 mana. We also get to scry 1, which is nice. That's Dissolve. Then we've got Inspiration, a 4 mana draw 2, so yet another draw spell. So we have Inspiration, we have Think Twice, and we have Courier's Capsule as our card advantage cards. So Inspiration, 4 mana, draw 2 cards. And then finally our 2 win conditions, Elixir and Kozilek. Then for our mana base we are running 25 lands. In order to cast our double blue spells and triple white spells, we do need to play a couple of tap lands here, so we have more blue and white sources. So we have 4 Azorius Guildgate, 3 Mystic Monastery, 3 Arcane Sanctum, then 8 islands and 7 plains. So that's the deck. Now let's play some games. Alright, let's take a look at our opening hand. We're on the play with a little bit of an awkward hand with double tap land. Although we do have Wall of Omens, Capsule and Dissolve for the early game, as well as Baneslayer. So I think we can keep this. Just hope to hit an untap land in the following turns here. We are only playing 7. No wait, we're playing 10 tap lands, the 4 Guildgates, and then 2 times 3 tri-lands. So we did draw a plains here, and I think we will. Let's see, our opponent green red. So he could have cultivate on 3. Now the question is, do we wanna dissolve a cultivate or not? And I think I would rather counter whatever he plays after the cultivate. So I think I'm okay with playing the Wall of Omens. Could also see casting the Capsule, because if we do draw another untapped land, that allows us to keep up the activation as well as dissolve. But we can do that at a later turn as well, since dissolve is good, but we don't really have to keep it up early, especially if we have a Wall of Omens. Alright. So here I think I'll just play the tap land plus Capsule. So then we can make the play I just mentioned of being able to keep up the activation plus Dissolve. So the opponent on Naya it looks like, so it's very likely that he has Cultivate on 3 here, or some sort of ramp spell. Let's see, third land. Instead, his own Wall of Omens. Alright, so our opponent's less aggressive than we thought. Could just be a value Naya deck. Or could just be missing Cultivate. Not entirely sure. But now I don't think I want to play out the Elixir quite yet. Since if at some point we do want to use Planar Cleansing, it can be a little awkward. So I think I'll just pause a turn here. Keep up Nullify plus Dissolve. And if our opponent doesn't play anything worth countering, we can always activate the Capsule. So fourth a land. Does our opponent have Cultivate after all? Attended Night. Huh. Not really a problem, but I think using our mana here with Nullify plus activating the Capsule seems worth it. And we get to draw 2. A Planar Cleansing, nice to know we have it, but we did miss on land drops unfortunately. I am tempted to fire off Think Twice to just try and hit a land, but if it's not an untapped one we don't get to keep up Dissolve, so I think I just pause the turn here. Don't have to discard to hand size quite yet, so we can pause the turn with Think Twice and Dissolve up. Fifth land, untapped for the opponent. It's gonna play a Young Pyromancer. So we could dissolve this one, or we could eventually cast Planar Cleansing. I think I'm okay with letting this one resolve, because for now we do have the Wall of Omens to prevent most of the damage. Beastmaster Ascension, we can always Planar Cleansing away, and our opponent does not have a threatening board presence to activate this one yet. And I really do want to fire off Think Twice to hit our land drop here. There we go. So that's good. So Beastmaster Ascension, pretty far away because it needs 7 counters. Opponent only with 1 attacking creature in play. So now we have to decide how we want to handle this. I don't want to play the Baneslayer because I'm pretty sure in a couple turns we want to play Planar Cleansing. So I think I just play my tap land here and keep up the Dissolve, Think Twice, as well as Reprisal and Divine Verdict. Let's see what the opponent does. Might build up a board that tries to go wide to use the Ascension. So that's a card I haven't seen before. Spore Burst. So he would get 2 tokens plus 1 from the Pyromancer. So that's fine because I'm just gonna cast Planar Cleansing next turn probably. And now we get to flashback Think Twice. Opponent have any other plays? So here we can block. Could also cast Divine Verdict. But I think I'm okay with blocking, sweeping the board, and then using Divine Verdict on whatever bigger creature our opponent might cast. Shock on Wall of Omens is perfect, since our wall was gonna die anyways. So let's go ahead and flashback Think Twice. And now we get to show off the power of a sweeper in this game. There's only Planar Cleansing and Anger of the Gods as sweepers, but when you do cast them, in a control deck. They are pretty powerful. So everything swept away. We have a full hand, our opponent on 4 cards. That's the way that a control deck pulls ahead. Banisher Priest without any creatures in play, just to apply some pressure. So our opponent is unlikely to have any creatures in hand, as he just played the Banisher Priest. So yeah, we're firmly in control at this point. We could play Baneslayer Angel, but I think I want to wait until we have Dissolve backup to protect the Baneslayer to close out the game. So for now I'll just pause the turn and maybe use Divine Verdict on the Priest, although at 20 life we don't even have to. Raised by Wolves. So our opponent's gonna get 2 Wolves in play, as well as pumping the Banisher Priest. And actually we do have a Nullify here that can counter an aura spell, which is pretty convenient. Doesn't come up a whole lot, but I think it's worth countering the Raised by Wolves there to prevent our opponent from getting those wolf tokens. And here, given that we have a Reprisal in hand, I think I'm okay with verdicting the Banisher Priest and possibly prevent a future Raised by Wolves. Alright, another land, so let's see. We can cast Baneslayer and keep up Nullify, Dissolve. So I think I'll go for it here. And pause the turn. Opponent with 1 card left could have a removal spell, in which case we have Dissolve, and if he has his own big creature we have Reprisal. So this game went about as good as you could expect. Let's go ahead and attack. .10 life swing thanks to lifelink. And we could play the Elixir. But there's nothing in our graveyard I really want to get back. So I'm just gonna pause the turn here. Craterhoof Behemoth. Just a 5/5. Or actually a 6/6. So we can Reprisal that one. And it's not really a big problem for us, but our opponent's on 0 cards, so we can counter whatever next big creature our opponent plays. And Think Twice is a good draw. So let's attack and pause the turn. And our opponent drew a land, so let's cast Think Twice here. Flash it back. If the game wants to cooperate, I guess not. Okay. Let's attack then. And pause the turn with 2 counters up, which will counter whatever our opponent can play, unless it's an uncounterable card. And sure, let's dissolve that one, just to show our opponent that we did have a counter. And an attack will be good enough here to win the game. Alright, so Baneslayer sort of stealing the show once again. No need to use Kozilek this game. Alright, let's move on to the next one. Okay, let's take a look at our opener, which does look promising, as we can play the Capsule on 2, and turn 3 keep up Dissolve and the activation up against another red deck, but no 1-drop is good, because without Wall of Omens this deck does struggle against the aggressive decks. And let's see if the opponent has a turn 2 play. Another mountain into Krenko's command, which is a little bit annoying because even Wall of Omens can only block one of them. We did draw Planar Cleansing, which is nice. Let's play our Capsule. One of the few cards in our deck that could die to Planar Cleansing if the timing is a little bit awkward. Alright, red-white tokens with Rebel Master. So opponent being on the play means we did not get to counter it with Dissolve. So we have to take quite a bit of damage from it before we can eventually Divine Verdict it. So let's play land, pause a turn. And only one white source means Planar Cleansing is pretty far away. So drawing one of our early interactive cards like Wall of Omens, like Erase Alarm or Voyage's End would be nice. But right now we are taking 1,000,000 damage on turn 4. Which is not where we want to be. Does the opponent have a follow-up? Nope. So let's activate the Capsule, which shows us more cards. 2 lands. So let's go ahead and play one. Pause a turn and try to Divine Verdict the Rebel Master. We have to discard as well. Don't want to discard the Sanctum because that's another white source. So I think Inspiration might be a little too slow. Alright, 5th land for the opponent. So at least no Storm Breath. Another Krenko's command we do have, unfortunately. Have to let resolve. Rebel Master gets in there. Let's try to Divine Verdict it, and let's see if our opponent has a way to protect him. Does not, but we still take 5 down to 2. And I don't think there's a way we can survive. Unless shock, yeah, that's just gonna finish it. Alright, so a quick loss there to a turn 3 Rebel Master with a turn 2 Krenko's command dealing even more damage. So yeah, not much we could have done there. Just had to hope to draw one of our earlier interactive spells. But yeah, let's move on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which has a turn 1 Arcane Sanctum into a bunch of Think Twices. Also has a Dissolve. This Elixir is the only card I don't like in our opening hand. If this were an island, this hand would be close to perfect. I think I'll keep, just based on those Think Twices, which will hopefully show us another island sooner or later. And opponent on a 66 card deck looks like, so we should have a little bit of an edge there. leads with Opulent Palace. Alright, Capsule. I actually... this is interesting. So, playing Think Twice gives us a higher chance of drawing a land and being able to keep up Dissolve next turn. Playing Capsule means we are forced to activate this next turn if we don't draw land, which I think is fine given that we're on the play and there's no turn 3 play I really need to have Dissolve for. So by playing the Capsule we get to look at more cards between this turn and next turn. Although we could have also cast Think Twice both turns, which would have resulted in the same amount of cards. But then we don't have the Think Twices for later turns. So I think it's close. I'm not sure what the ideal play was there. A Wall of Omens. So yeah, let's go ahead and activate the Capsule to hopefully hit a land. Alright, Guildgate's fine. Let's pause the turn. Opponent with a quest for the Gravelord, which is not very good against us since we don't have a lot of creatures our opponent's gonna be able to kill. A Wall of Omens is one of them, and Baneslayer another, so we're just gonna have to wait until we can protect the Baneslayer from removal. Drawing a land there was pretty good, so let's pause the turn with Think Twices, Negates and Dissolves up, and start drawing cards if the opponent doesn't present something we want to counter. Child of Night we can block with Wall of Omens, so no need to dissolve that. So let's cast Think Twice number 1 and Think Twice number 2. Fifth land is nice, and I think we can play the Wall of Omens here, keeping up our counter spells plus flashback, and then next turn we can play the Guildgate or the island after all. Don't have to discard to hand size, so we're in a decent spot. Question is, do we counter a removal spell on the Wall of Omens? I don't think we do. Guard-Gomazoa? Sure. A card that does not attack is what we want to see. We can just eventually find a Planar Cleansing before casting Baneslayer Angel to get rid of this. So opponent's gonna gain 2 life here. And we get to flashback Think Twice. Unless our opponent has another play here. Dead Weight. Interesting. So we could counter that to pretty much gain 2 life every turn that we would otherwise lose. If we counter this, we also prevent a counter going on the quest. Our opponent's on 3 cards. I don't hate using a Negate on this one, rather than the Dissolve, in case we do want to counter 2 creatures. So let's keep the wall alive. Kozilek, a little bit early to the party, but I'll still take it. And here, I think I'll play the island, so we can both cast Dissolve and Flashback Think Twice, and next turn play the Guildgate to do the same. Not in any rush to play out Baneslayer, because we do want to find a Planar Cleansing first. Opponent's gonna attack. Alright. Let's prevent 2 damage. Opponent still gains 2, up to 24. And hopefully he doesn't put us in the same situation as last turn, instead he does. Do we counter this? I think we can flashback Think Twice first. Although it's still, yeah, this is not an instant. Cancel. No. Are we forced to cast this, I guess? Oh well, let's flashback Think Twice then. We did find Divine Verdict. I guess we let this happen. Does get a counter on the quest. Now 4 lands, so could still play something. So that's why I didn't actually wanna flashback Think Twice there. Now that it's the end step, I'm okay with flashing back the second one. Alright, more lands is good. Getting closer to Kozilek. And here, I'll just pause a turn. We have Divine Verdict up. We have to discard. I guess we discard Quicken. Could have cast it, but then we did have to discard anyways. Cloudfin Raptor is fine. We can counter whatever following creature he plays. Gravedigger getting back nothing, just to evolve Cloudfin Raptor. Given that we don't have Planar Cleansing in hand, I think I'll counter this one. To prevent the Cloudfin Raptor from evolving and getting a +1/+1 counter. Now our opponent stepped out, so if he attacks we get to Divine Verdict. And our opponent only has 1 card left. So let's see, how much mana do we have? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So unless we draw an untapped land here, we do. Alright, so we could play out the Baneslayer, but that doesn't really do much against Gargomazoa is a problem. So I think I'll just play the Monastery and play Elixir. So if we draw 1 more land we can cast Kozilek. Opponent could still have a removal spell in hand. Can't deal us any damage. And I don't think there's a need to activate the capsule at the elixir quite yet, because we did want to draw an extra land, and by shuffling these cards in our deck we have a lower chance of drawing a land. Although some of these do draw cards, so I don't know, maybe it was still better to activate it. Now we did hit our land, so next turn we get to cast Kozilek. So let's pause a turn. I could consider playing the Baneslayer to bait, let's say, an Edict effect, which would be pretty good against Kozilek. But maybe we can just wait until we have 30 mana to also cast Dissolve. Alright, Planar Cleansing makes it easier. So now we do want to activate the Elixir before casting Planar Cleansing. And I guess, yeah, I guess we have to wait 1 more turn here if we also want to keep up Dissolve then. I'll wait 1 more turn. So next turn we can cast Planar Cleansing, sweep everything away. Then I want to play Baneslayer Angel as a bait to make the opponent use a removal spell on it. Royal Elemental's fine, that's just gonna die to Planar Cleansing. Opponent hits us for 1, but it doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna use Baneslayer Angel as bait for a removal spell. I can protect it once with Dissolve if I want to, if our opponent has 2 removal spells, and then I'm gonna play Kozilek to probably win the game. So let's start by casting Planar Cleansing. I had to activate the Elixir because otherwise that would die to Planar Cleansing. So I could tap out for Baneslayer, but I think I can be patient and keep up Dissolve to counter something our opponent could play. If our opponent doesn't play anything relevant, we can next turn play Baneslayer with protection up. A 2-1 Death Toucher is not a problem because Baneslayer does have First Strike, so that ignores the Death Touch. So no need to counter that one. Opponent passes. Inspiration the draw, not bad. But I think I'll just slam down this Baneslayer and pass a turn. Opponent does have the Edict, which would have been good against Kozilek, so we do get to dissolve this one, I think. Because I still don't want the opponent to kill the Baneslayer this easily. Put this one on the bottom. So if our opponent has a second Edict, that's fine, then we get to cast Kozilek. So our opponent could certainly play some things here that could be problematic. If he goes land a Runescar Demon, for example. Alright, Flesh to Dust is fine. So we did successfully make the opponent use 2 removal spells. So hopefully Kozilek is good to go. Now, unfortunately, the Tidehollow Strix does get to block Kozilek and kill him, which was not the case with Baneslayer Angel. But Kozilek is going to get to attack and make the opponent sacrifice for permanence. So I think I'm okay with that. Alright, we did not find, unfortunately, a Negate which could counter another removal spell, but think twice, not terrible. So we pause a turn here. And let's find out if the opponent does have another removal spell. 2 cards left. If he doesn't, then he does have to keep the Strix on defense. And then we're not even forced to attack with Kozilek, we can just wait until we can remove this. So, let's cast Think Twice. So now the question is making the opponent sacrifice 4 permanents good enough here? I think we can lead with Inspiration to see what we draw. Okay. Think we can play another one. I would like to find either a removal spell. Alright, Reprisal's not terrible. Still doesn't remove the Strix, but unfortunately there's not a ton of cards in our deck that do. I think I'm okay with letting the opponent sacrifice 4 permanents. He likely keeps the Indulgent Tormentor alive, and then we can Reprisal that one. So opponent likely just sacks 4 lands, keeps the Strix to block the Kozilek. Yep, there we go. Kozilek will shuffle our graveyard back into our library, which does have some sweet cards in it. And meanwhile we get to keep up Nullify. Alright, so Kozilek dies. I don't think I need to Reprisal before the graveyard gets shuffled, because with the opponent on 2 lands there's not many creatures he could play that I would want to Reprisal, since it's unlikely your opponent plays a very large creature here. Pause the turn with Nullify and Quicken up. Let's cast Quicken. Draw a card. And there's Baneslayer. Let's cast our wall first as Edict protection. Let's cast an Inspiration. Would like to find a counterspell to protect the Baneslayer. Alright, I guess if we have 2 angels, that'll also work. So we get to keep up Nullify here. Play the Sanctum. Pause the turn. So our opponent could find a way to deal with Baneslayer, although there's not a ton. And our opponent has seen enough. Gomazoa is not gonna enter play, because that would prevent all the damage from Baneslayer. So let's attack. And then I guess we can cast an Inspiration. Alright, there's our Elixir. Play a Capsule. Activate the Capsule. Alright, there's a Negate, so now our Baneslayer is probably safe. And we get to pause the turn. Flashback, think twice, end of turn. Still keeping up Negate. Another wall. And attack. And I guess just to increase our damage output, I'll also play the Archangel here. And play the Sanctum and pause the turn. Our opponent did draw some lands, but yeah, let's just attack for 9. We could play the wall, but there is no point here. There's the Edict, which we will negate. And that's probably game here, as we can attack for 9. Still have the solve up. So I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day.